Hi everybody, welcome. I'm Barry, the president of the Atoa, the Artist Talk on Art. Welcome to our 45th year. Artist Talk on Art has been around a long time in New York City, holding talks on all different topics for artists, artist services. Recently we did a talk about the MFA programs. Just 2 weeks ago was a talk on portraiture. And tonight we have an interesting talk where we're spanning the globe in a sense. We have 2 artists from Iran and 1 artist from India. This talk is in coordination with an exhibit that's going on in a pop-up gallery on the very far east side in Lower Manhattan, where there will be a closing as well. They just had an opening a little while ago, and there'll be a closing event. This panel is organized and moderated by Audra Lambert. There's Audra here. We have 3 panelists. I'm going to let Audra introduce you, if you don't mind my pronunciation of your name, because it would just be so bad. And just bear with us. We do have images going through a Gmail account that we'll punch up, so we'll probably go a little slow. Our format will be Audra will introduce everybody, and the panelists will talk, show images, and open up dialogue as we go. Okay? So without further ado, I'll introduce Audra. Audra Lambert. Thank you.
Hi everyone, so I'm going to sit down. I'm also in the process of setting up hopefully a slideshow, some images from the exhibit. And also I did just want to reflect, we have 3 artists here tonight out of 4 in the exhibition as a whole. So here tonight I will allow everyone to introduce themselves, but they reflect, each of them has a background in India, Iran, also India and Iraq, and they can explain that a little bit further to you. But if you don't mind maybe just giving us 30 seconds to complete this photo. We hope to pull together a photo slideshow for you, so just give us about 30 seconds for that. Do you want to go to the whole series or the red? Just probably interested in order what you don't know about the art. It's good for you. I think maybe it's just like here. I was having problems.
I mean, she was studying, you know, like we don't I've studied it. And I always consider myself a student. I mean, I'm not professional, but I can teach younger kids, and I'm part of an adult school, so, but this is so when I talk,
This is strange. It's working. Do you want transitional practice? That's what I see.
so lost.
Let's do that again.
I just, because I'm not skills, I like to post my experience.
You said sculpture.
It's just like you told me. It's not too dark.
I got you right, too dark.
Yeah.
Too dark. Which one?
Need some.
That one?
You know, is it okay?
Yeah, that's good.
That's good.
I feel like I'm a teacher again. I'm solving There you go. Okay. So you might just have to kind of cross it. Okay. Right, so the easiest solution would be to have everyone show their work on their website, so that's what we're going to do. So hi again, everyone. So my name is Audrey Lambert. As I mentioned, I'm actually going to hand over the mic to everyone to introduce themselves and their background. They can talk a little bit about their work and their practice, and if they want to offer us maybe a short bio, that would be great as well.
I did, but it sort of hurt the video quality. That's why I put it back. I'm sorry.
Is there a half option or not so much?
The one behind, if you could take the one
That's
that
okay.
is
Yeah, maybe the underneath.
right on the back, that one should be good. No,
So
the
as I
one,
mentioned,
yeah,
also there's
leave
a
it like
work
that.
artist in the show. Her name is Shayda Soleimani. And if you have any questions about Shayda's work, I'm happy to point you in the right direction. So without any further ado, I'm going to hand the mic along to each of our artists so they can introduce themselves. And then I'll circle back and introduce myself as well.
Hi, thank you for coming. My name is Dhanushree Gariyar. I'm an artist from India. Lived a major part of my life in India. Moved to the US about 10 years ago. Have been living in New York since. So I did my bachelor's in India. I did my master's in CUNY, City College. I did a fellowship with the Laundromat Project. I've done a fellowship with the Bronx Museum as well. And right now I work with the stories of immigrants, and I make them into large-scale paper installations. I also work with some screen printing and embroidery. So that's a little bit about me.
Hi, I'm Samira Abbasi. I was born in Iran and left there when I was 2 years old and went to England, where I lived for 30 years. And then in 1998, I moved to New York to help set up the Elizabeth Foundation for the Arts, where I've had a studio for 20 years. And so I studied painting and sculpture, well, painting actually, I became a sculptor later, at Canterbury in England. And then, so I've been just, doing my own work and independently and showing, and I have work in various collections, including the Metropolitan Museum, the British Museum, and many other private and semi-private collections. And
I know this is just an introduction, but that's a big step from I came to the United States and then I helped found the Elizabeth Foundation. How did that sort of happen?
Oh, well, because my husband and I came here to establish it, and it was a semi-family foundation, but it's in fact a public foundation. It's a 501c3. But with that, we acquired a building in Midtown, and it has 80 studios, a gallery space, and a print workshop, the Robert Blackburn print workshop. So that's the reason I'm here. That was the initial reason. And then had children, they became Americans, I became an American.
Hi everyone, thank you for being here. I'm Camille Esquel. I'm a first generation, third daughter from an Iraqi Jewish family from Bombay, or from Mumbai. So my work has spanned many years and has several iterations, but there's always a key element in it, and that's a psychological element that has to do with sociological and familial and cultural threads. The work that I'm doing now centers more on the cultural aspects. I put materials together from all three backgrounds, and a lot of it is a critique and a celebration in a way of this complex world that, the confluence of cultures that I came from, and really the reverberating biases that are inherent in those ancient cultures, and just trying to sort out a lot of the issues that are, that perpetuate through generations. So that's what my work is focused on right now.
It does.
So I will also obviously introduce myself. I'm also going to introduce the show a little bit. We are having a closing event on Friday, which I will reiterate as well. You're more than welcome to come and see it for yourselves. We're open this week. So then I will provide a short introduction as well to the theme of the talk, but really I wanted to allow space for these extremely talented and formidable artists to speak on their work as it is in the show, but also in relationship to the theme as it is, but overall just how their work is present in the space and how their practice has evolved over time. So first I have to say thank you to obviously Atoa, to artist Chalk on Art for having us here this evening. I also want to say thank you as well to Shada Soleimani, who as I mentioned isn't here. She lives in Providence. She's the fourth artist in the show. I want to say thank you to, so I'm actually one of the curators for the exhibit. The other is Anita. She's not here tonight, Anita Albans-Neilert. She runs Art to Zebras. And I'm happy to facilitate a meeting with her. She has a website as well that I can share with all of you. Finally, we have to say thank you to our sponsors, and that's the WCAPS organization. It's an NGO. And it stands for Women of Color Advancing Peace, Security, and Conflict Transformation. So those are my thank yous for the evening. Now I can launch in. As mentioned, my name is Audrey Lambert. So I work primarily here in New York. I work, so I write as an art critic. I also work independently as a curator since 2014. I also went over at the master's level at City College of New York, which is how I actually first encountered the work here by Down the Street. I have an undergraduate in Asian art history. I lived in Japan for a while as well, where I taught English. So I run Anti-Mag, which is an online mag, ANTE, for Under the Radar Art. I've run that since 2014. I also run Antecedent Projects, which is, as I mentioned, it's a platform for all the work I do independently as a curator. So I work with the Fountain House Gallery and the Arsenal Gallery, among others. I'm also a founding member of the Ninth Street Collective. It's a woman-run organization helping artists and specifically helping them to work in a more overall strategic capacity, and also to write anything from, say, an exhibition proposal to if they're working on grants, etc. Finally, I'm also the newest addition to The Yard, which is a co-working space. I'm actually working as the curator on-site for the Williamsburg Bridge location. So, a little about me. So for the exhibit, Reorientations really started as a dream in 2018. It's really been a year in the making. We actually had a part 1 show in February, which was very well attended, I have to say, and the work was wonderful. And that was in Soho. And then we also have this part up right now, which is in the East Village, and I will also mention the location and the hours. If you would like to visit, we would love to have you in the space. So it really started as a dream to realize this show last year. I have the greatest admiration for all of these artists, and it's really thrilling to work with all of you. So I feel very honored as well to be able to work with them. As the curator for each of the iterations of the show, I had another curator, Natasha Stefanovic, for the first part, and Anita is also the curator with me for this one. So it was we had initially really conceived it as sort of a contemporary form of a response to Edward Said's Orientalism, but specifically from a feminist intersectional lens. So we wanted to talk about some of the ideas we have raised, but also embrace ideas from the women who have lived through these stories. So that was really a major part of it because we can see through their work how the stories are real and it's not just in the abstract and the intellectual as well. So I will provide a short introduction to Saeed, but really, as I mentioned, I would like for the focus for this evening to be around the artists and their work. So finally, the plug for the show, which you've all been waiting for. It's at 246 East 4th Street, Reorientations. So it's at 4th Street at Avenue B. It's on the southwest corner near what I think is called the Cake Building. It's extremely bright colors. It's like a bright purple with like some yellow and orange on it. It's impossible to miss it. So it's open from 12 to 5 p.m. tomorrow, and then from 12 to 7 Wednesday and Thursday and Friday. And Friday we're having a closing party from 6 to 8. So we hope if you're free that you will come and you will join us and celebrate and see the work in person, and hopefully speak with some of the artists as well. Yeah, so while, as I mentioned, the exhibit has Orientalism as a starting point, we're really focusing on the stories here in the artist's work. And hearing more from that, however, just in order to provide a slight bit of context, Orientalism is the seminal piece of work by Edward Said. He's a Palestinian, he was a Palestinian American intellectual who was a professor at Harvard and Princeton. 3 of his really notable works are Orientalism, which is from 78, The Question of Palestine from 1979, and then Culture and Imperialism is from the year 1993. So the text Orientalism itself actually mounts a critique of cultural representations, specifically how the West viewed the Orient over time and actually had a separate field of study for the Orient. So Edward Said is actually the founder for the post-colonial studies throughout the world. So again, we are really hoping tonight to reframe the conversation and to hear through these artists' perspectives, through their life stories, but more importantly through their artistic practice, how it's possible to assert a feminist critique of the colonial as well. That being said, I think we can hopefully dive in. If anyone wants to take a stab, maybe Camille, you're on the far end, so if you want to, we can start with you. So I have some questions, but also I would like to open it up afterwards as well to questions. So feel free to be writing notes or forming questions of your own. Okay, so Camille, I wanted to ask first, so in Orientalism, Said notes, the more one is able to leave one's cultural home, the more easily is one able to judge it, and the whole world as well. The more easily, too, does one assess oneself and alien cultures with the same combination of intimacy and a distance. So I wanted to know, how has your experience with immigration changed your individual perspective and also fed your practice as an artist?
You know, I read the question.
Are you able to hear?
Can you bring the mic a little
Is
closer?
this on?
Is it on?
Yes.
No, maybe it isn't on.
Here, I'll just kind of separate this.
Thank you. When reading the question, you put it out there for us to mull over. I'm reading this question in 2 ways. The first being, because I'm born here, I have a different view of it, because colonialism didn't affect me. But my grandfathers and ancestors left Iraq for Mumbai, which is now Mumbai. So they were living in India, but sojourning in India. Does that make sense? They were, as many other cultures were doing. So in terms of the British who were there, they embraced the British. So they were kind of Anglophiles in a way, certainly my father was, because they didn't know anything different. And it was a culture sitting in another culture for safety reasons and for commerce. So I thought that was an interesting question because we're looking at it from a completely different point of view. In terms of your asking about the distance, and that's separate from the colonialism question. I'm looking at the cultures that I come from with distance, because that they've affected us and so, how should I say, not, in so integral a way. Does that make sense? So, visceral.
Yeah.
Visceral. So, it's an exploration, it's an examination, it's taking apart and putting back together again. But those are two different answers to the same question.
Okay, so the question was about colonialism, right? Centrally.
And about seeing from this.
Seeing from a distance, right. So, once I left Iran at the age of 2, which was not my decision, obviously, looking back, growing up in England and feeling like an outsider there in the 70s, we lived in a small town. We were the only non-whites apart from the Chinese restaurant. And so I grew up thinking that I was Arabic, and that's what we spoke at home. However, most Persians don't speak Arabic, they speak Farsi. And so I became aware that I was actually a minority within the land that I was supposed to belong to in the first place. So I never felt at home anywhere. I always felt there was a never land somewhere else. And then, at the age of 33, when I came here, I felt like finally I'd landed somewhere where this is my home, because everybody's from somewhere. Because England is not a place where there are generations of immigrants like there are here. And so, as an adult, I found a home. As a child, there was no such feeling. And I think that gave birth to the work, because I needed to find a home in it. It gave me this sense of belonging that I could not find externally. I had to be internal about that sense. What was the question about seeing? Yeah, well, what it is that you realize that nationalism, the idea of nation states, is pretty strange, because my region in Iran, which is southwest, near the border to Iraq, which is an oil-rich region, used to be its own country, and it was buried in 1920 and absorbed by Iran. So the idea of colonialism, nationalism, people taking over peoples and banning their own language. Had I stayed in Iran, I would have been taught in Farsi, my Arabic would have been obsolete.
So you have a physical distance, but you also have a historic, like a time,
Yes.
as well as separation.
With me, I lived in India for 23 years, and then I got married and I moved here. My grandfather actually was a part of the Gandhi movement, and so growing up, my dad's cousins who moved here, they would say, you should move to America for a better life. And my grandfather would say, so then why did we fight for this? Anyway, fast forward, I married my then boyfriend. We moved here for a better life. I realized something, the West is perceived in a very different way back home. And when everybody heard that I was going to America, there was this thing where, oh, it's the ultimate place. Like, it's the place to be, especially as an artist. You're going to make a lot of money, you're going to become famous, etc., etc. You come here and you realize it's a very different place. It's a very different, it's like the West is perceived, was at least that back then was perceived in a very, very different way. And India, with lack of social media, lack of knowledge. Anyway, you come here, and I came from a very protective family. My dad was very protective of me. I learned a lot. I think I matured a lot after coming to the US. You're pretty much on your own. You're figuring out stuff on your own. I think I'm able to, with my culture, I think I'm able to look at it more objectively now. I do appreciate parts of it and it does show in my work. But my practice has changed a lot, partly because of my experience as an immigrant, partly because of the conversations that I have with people about their immigration experience.
And what year did you move here again?
I moved here when Obama was the president. It was 2010.
And how long have you had the immigrant stories as part of your
Stories.
practice?
I think I started this when I started my grad school program. I had a dream of doing this when I came to the, a year after I moved here. And when I would talk to so many people. So I think it was about 2014.
Oh,
That's when I started working on this. Yeah, 5 years.
thank you. So, sorry, Donnie, you have your work up, so I'm gonna ask you the next question first. So, switching over with this idea of immigration, but also with being a woman who's been immigrating, right? Because that is its own, obviously, framework of experiences. So specifically in relation to Said's perspective as a Palestinian man who's been confronting viewpoints related to the colonial, what aspects of colonialism do you find essential to kind of either confront or consider in your practice as a woman? And these could be aspects that maybe Said had missed because he didn't have that experience, or it could relate to the social or cultural norms that you had at home versus here.
I think with the people that I work with, if I have to turn this question towards my practice, with the people that I work with, a lot of these people don't have a platform to speak about themselves, to showcase their story. A lot of these experiences just go unnoticed, and it's mainly women of color that I work with. So I think, getting these voices out, that's the most important, part of my practice. And especially, as a woman in India, my practice was very different. I came from a very male-dominated school of thought, where I still remember this. When I was in undergraduate school, I tried to make paintings of different hairstyles, and my professor told me, "I think you're gravitating towards feminist work. Why are you doing that?" So I think coming to the US gave me a newfound freedom in terms of my practice, and just showcasing what's the most important part for as a woman, and these stories that need to be told of them.
So the same question.
The feminist perspective, Edward Said's ideas. Well, I have problems with the question of feminism because it's more like humanism as far as I'm concerned. I happen to be a woman. That's the body I was born in. For me, it's not so much political as it is biological, and the biological has its own rules that must be obeyed. There's no choices. However, I am aware that my work speaks for my mother, my grandmother, all the people that didn't have a voice. Even my mother was barely educated, and so there's a huge cultural leap between me and her, and I feel that some of the experiences that I'm trying to relate are to do with her and her mother and her sister and all of the females in my family, but it's not a feminist issue for me. It's more like a visceral reality of once you're pregnant, for example, you feel like your mother. I got tattoos done like my mother. There are certain rules that have, formed me that from the inside. And for me, feminism is an obvious, of course you're a feminist if you're a woman. You believe that you are equal as a human being in that way. But I don't believe in being like men. It's not a competition of strength. We have profound understandings in different ways. I have a boy and a girl twins, and as soon as they were born, there was an understanding how profoundly different they were as individuals, and that has just gone on as in their gender too. So I would also say another thing about the difference between me and Edward Said is that he came from a family that was probably more well-to-do, and I would say that, you know, the females in his family were probably more educated than mine.
So I'll deal with the, again, not in terms of the colonialism, but in terms of the female aspect to it. And I used to always say that in a lot of my statements about, I happen to be a female, so I'm going to look at it from my point of view. You filter your understandings through what you are and your experience and whatnot. And I talked about this the other day in terms of a triple whammy, because our cultures are all ancient, the ones that I come from, and they're all, there's gender bias in all of them. I mean, Jewish culture, ancient Jewish, Sephardic, especially to the Middle East, the Middle Eastern, Iraqi, Turkish, you know, that's all about males. And also in India, the males are, again, heralded, and the females are, you know, second-class citizens. So the idea of being second-class, being a second-class citizen doesn't sit very well with me. We weren't bat mitzvah because in the Iraqi Jewish culture, they don't believe in it. They didn't believe that the girls should have a bat mitzvah. We were, and because my mother was well off, my father wasn't as well off, they almost thought in a colonial way, though, this is interesting, that the girls should be protected, but they also, for us, they kind of encouraged the arts. Now, in Victorian times and all those times, they encouraged the women to play the piano and to sew and to paint and to whatnot. So there is that aspect of that in my background. But a lot of it was always feeling that there were no males in my family. There were only 3 girls, and I'm the last of the girls. So I kind of felt like maybe I shouldn't have been a girl or something, because by the time I came, they were probably just like, oh God, another one of these. But I'm not going to say we weren't well loved. We weren't. There were other issues. But there's such a thrust there, that undercurrent of feeling that somehow you don't own up, was one of the driving forces in the way I see the world, the way I see my world. I should say my world, not other people's.
So I also wanted to open it up, obviously, out of the consideration for the fact that this is artists who talk on art, but probably also to maybe other artists. So I thought we could talk a little bit about maybe some hot button issues that are happening today, or just like how artists are perceived in the current climate in the art world. It's also important to note, which I didn't say from the beginning about this show, is it is a show of intergenerational perspectives. And this is intentional because we all have to hold on to the baton, and we have to pass it, and we have to guide each other and feed off of one another, and that's really important as women. And obviously in the arts, but so I wanted to talk about humanism or feminism, humanism from a female's perspective, which I liked. So this is specifically about, it's about the art world, but it's more, I think, true to American society. So in contemporary American culture, we have an expression that feminism isn't feminism unless it's intersectional. And this has really reached a rallying cry. So I wanted to ask each of you in your practice, either here or like when you've been abroad perhaps as well, if it's relevant, how have you noticed intersectionality, either intersectionality or identity politics, as either opening up perhaps even more opportunities to you or fewer opportunities, or maybe just a different sort of style of opportunities altogether. And specifically here and now in 2019 as opposed to maybe 2010. Samir, I haven't started with you yet, so I'm going to start with you.
So, I have a question about intersectionality and what that actually means. Are you talking about feminism across races, or?
Yes, so the idea that you have to include actually multiple perspectives, either in an art exhibit or in the conversation. So that would be if it's LGBTQ, but mainly it's across either someone from a different background, from a different race, from a different, I mean, it can be a perspective across either global culture, or it can even be like really small hyper-local cultures as well, like how you're saying that you're from Iran, but you don't speak Farsi. So it can be the inclusion of a multiplicity of perspectives at the local or the global level.
Yeah, well, you see, that's
Multi-background.
New York.
Well, that's why I
You
said
see, that's
America,
what's
right.
rich. It's very, very rich like that here. And there is a way that the way that curators put shows together, for example, that is within the consideration to cover all the bases. I mean, but by putting this show together, I got the sense that you weren't going as broad. There was a thinner slice in, you weren't worried about including trans, gay. Like it's semi-generational, but not as wide as it could be. Now, I've been in shows where it's to do with the subject. It's to do with, I've been shown as an Iranian. I've been shown as an Arab. I've been shown as somebody from England. I make the work from a different place, though. The work itself doesn't come from that view. It's sort of, if I hit those targets, it's kind of by accident, and it's to do with the curators and the writers that will take on those mantles and present me as whatever suits, and that's fine by me, because that does not interfere with the way I do my work, or how, or the need to do it. It doesn't come from any of those places anyway. But I'm aware, because I'm in the Elizabeth Foundation has 80 studios, and I'm aware of that, we've covered a very broad base, but our selection is blind. We don't know what gender this person is, or whether they're gay or straight, or black or white, or, but because it's New York, we've covered our bases. So.
For you personally, I guess, have you shown, or have you had your work maybe shown in a different context in the past where you were framed either more or less a certain way, or that hasn't, like, have you not seen a difference, I guess? Just a reflection from your perspective.
Well, yeah, I wish that I was included in shows less as a woman, more as an artist.
Right.
I mean,
Which is something I hear as a curator all the time,
Yeah.
which I'm happy to hear every time.
Yeah. And a lot of the curators I work with are women. Because, I mean, look at my work. Most of the figures are of women, and it's very, biological, internal, visceral, pattern, the dress, the braid, the subject lends itself that way. But yeah, my wish is to be more included in both genders, where gender is not the issue.
I started showing work only I think 4 years now, since I started my master's program. I have been included in shows that's mostly women or immigrant artists, men and women. I think, since I just started showing work, I think it's too early for me to answer that question really. But I do wish that my work would be included in other galleries as well, or other spaces as well that show, because I've had work that shows immigration, family immigration. I've shown work where it's women artists, but I think just a broader community work as well. That's the other space that I've shown work. The London project, yeah. So, I don't know which direction my future would be.
So you think you would like to see a broader?
Yes,
show,
definitely.
Inclusion.
Yes.
Without it being siloed.
Yes,
How do you
yes.
feel about that, Camille? Do you feel similarly?
I've been around a long time. So, I've been in a lot of different kinds of shows. This is popular now.
Yeah.
Who knows where it's going to be, in 2 years. It's of the moment. There's a political aspect to it. When something else happens or when this gets tired, it'll morph into something else. That's another hot button issue. I think there's more opportunities because of the what's going on in the world, and people are concerned, climate. And people are concerned about that, and art is a way of expressing, and also of upholding. You can upholding cultures, exposing cultures, giving them their moment. It's just another avenue and a way of giving voice to people. I was in a show recently called Tradition Interrupted, and that showed all kinds of traditions, that their artists interrupted in some way or restated or exposed or some way. That was an interesting show. It wasn't because I was a woman. It was because it had to do with the subject matter, the theme. But I've been in a variety of shows. Sometimes it's for a female, being female, and sometimes now it might be for this aspect, which I think is very interesting, our cultural backgrounds and our cultural identities. Or it could be sometimes for the work itself. It depends. But this is the issue of one of the issues of the moment. And I think it does provide opportunities. I think it's looking at things that weren't looked at before. And what prefaced it or what was promulgating it is, the climate and the issues of the day.
So I have a follow-up for that, but it sounds like it's worth repeating that the onus is on the curators for making more interesting show things. Healthy criticism for us all. Okay, so then as a part two, I wanted to talk a little bit about the institution. Sure, yeah, the work is all part of this theme, right? So I do have a question about that, and I can maybe narrow it a little bit, but I thought it would be nice to have sort of a hot button issue moment and then to move into the work. So the second part of that question is then being at the institutional level, how do you feel about, like, for example, at the MoMA or for a long time now at a place like the Tate Modern, you have, say, like a combination or a reconsideration of the contemporary, but in more of an international perspective, more of a global perspective. Some institutions still have silos where they have, like at the Met, you have the Asian wing where you either have space for artists who are, say, maybe artists from China, from Korea, what have you. For example, like when I am seeing a show by artists like such as Wally Durad or Shirin Nishat, who we learned tonight is right down the street, they can sometimes be shown within the contemporary wing of a museum, but also they can be shown within the framework of, say, a wing of the museum that relates to their background. So I wanted to know, what is your opinion on still having a separation versus having all of the contemporary art shown in relationship to one another in a single space? Is it okay to start with you, Dolly? And then we will move on to the art. That's the point well taken.
I think it depends on the work that's being shown. I think, like, if it's a subject that they're trying to show, and if it has multiple artists that work on a certain theme, then yes, that work belongs there. But I also appreciate when I do see work in a particular cultural wing, because I think I appreciate the work more, I understand the work more. I see the work in context with the contemporary and like, with the historical view, with the historical lens. So I think I really appreciate that too.
Do you want to go next, Camille? I saw you.
No, I agree. Also, in terms of what you were saying about opportunity, that opens up another, pathway to opportunities to show. And I think they're both
Having
valid.
them both, maybe.
Yeah,
Having the two.
I mean, then, it opens up more, I'm using the opportunity again. The work is valid on many a level, and it is on many a level. It's just not one thing or the other thing or the other thing. It's a conglomeration of things, an intersection of things that are what makes the artist up. We're not all one-dimensional, but I think because there are different dimensions that we can plug into those different dimensions, and I think that makes it more enriching, personally. I really do. I love to know about the cultural thing, and I love to see them in a contemporary sense. That's what makes contemporary art interesting also in and of itself, because it opens up barriers that were, or walls, or silos that were there initially.
Right.
I am agreeing with it broadens the work to see it in different contexts. So when my work was acquired by the Met, it had to jump through two hoops. One was the Islamic department, and one was the contemporary department. I mean, but then, since then, the Met has changed because it's handed off to the Met Brewer. That's their contemporary wing now. They needed more space to kind of explore that idea of contemporary art. When my work was shown at the Met, it was in the Islamic department, in the Kevorkian room, and it was shown alongside the manuscripts that it referred to. It was a very specific historic show. And I was shown with two other artists, one of whom was Nikki Najumi, I can't remember them, but they were the old men of, Iranian art, contemporary. I mean, they're still alive. And their work was shown alongside its influence within the department. So curators have a job to put a show together within a corner of a museum that refers to their specialty. And they will use your work to do it. The British Museum is currently, they've got a show called Masterpieces of the Human Figure. I'm in that show. It went to Korea, it's now in Spain, and my work is going to be shown alongside Leonardo drawings, statues of the Buddha, that 5,000 years old. So the object itself, the thing that you make, will find its way any which way you like, and in 200 years' time, who knows? Because once a museum has it, it's a piece of information they'll plug in somewhere. One of the best shows I saw at the Tate Modern was things like, I think it was the YBAs showing alongside, like there was a Tracy Emin thing shown alongside, I don't know, an early Louise Bourgeois or something. I love that kind of, that mix. And Hans Bellmer. Hans Bellmer shown alongside Louise Bourgeois, but also, the semi-historic with the absolute fresh contemporary, for me, is a very exciting prospect. It really does make you see contemporary art, because it's never without history. History is everything to art. There is no such thing as an original idea. There's an original twist, but never an original idea.
That was a good segue, but also I just want to sit with that for a minute because I really liked all of those ideas. So we're coming up on half an hour and some change, so I thought it would be nice if we end on sort of a discussion. I think because we unfortunately don't have images of the work, so I do hope that you come to the space. Again, it's at 246 East 4th Street. I think it might be nice if each of you were to speak about one of the works in the show and kind of the origin of that. And also, the most important thing is we want to know what you have either happening right now in other places or what you have that's in the near future that's coming up. Samir, you already covered that, but now it's also other opportunities that you have that are forthcoming. So I think for this one, I'll just perhaps start with you, Donnie.
The work that I have at the show, I'll speak about one of them. I think it should be on the Hello Purple.
Hello, Purple.
Yeah. So this work is at the show, and this is the story of a woman who moved from Switzerland. Her dad is from Sri Lanka. She moved from there because she felt like she didn't belong there, that she was the dark kid. That's the way she said that. She was the dark kid. Because of her skin color, she felt like she didn't belong there. And so she moved to the US hoping for a better life. Again, I think her dream was shattered when she moved here. I think a lot of what happens in this story, I think, also touches on a lot of the issues that people here face. She had healthcare issues, she didn't have access to good healthcare. That was one of the major parts of her story. She was physically abused. She stayed in a job that she stayed because of the visa situation. She was a social worker, so finding a company that sponsored her visa was difficult for her. She went through sexual abuse with her boss, whom she was scared to report. So it touches a lot of these very sensitive issues, but she fought through it all. She stayed back, and she's a successful person today. The flowers in the story, that's sort of taken from the tattoo that she got for herself, because she survived through this tough time. And right now I think I'm just making work. I have a 3-year-old daughter, and I focused the last 3 years, I think, with my mother, being a mom. I also work in the education side of it. I'm a program director of an art studio that supports adults with learning and developmental disabilities. But right now I'm focusing on just making new work. That's where I am.
So if you go to sculptures, we might find the grandmother with the twins. Let's see if we can see that. If you scroll, no, maybe not.
Is she in a different view? Or is she perhaps in the shrine?
No.
Oh, okay.
So go up. Let's look at the ancestor head at the top.
Okay. The one on the top left.
Yeah. Yeah, there he is. So the work, this is an iteration of one of the pieces in a shrine that I'm presenting at Reorientations 2. And the shrine is called Ode to All My Mothers. And so the central character is in the middle of the shrine, and I coated the surround in blue. So I was quoting the Virgin Mary. There's a particular blue that's associated with the Virgin Mary that's lapis lazuli. And so I wanted to kind of, a preciousness, a shrine-like quality surrounding this central mother figure who's carrying 2 children at her breast. But she's not their mother, she's their grandmother. There's a sense of genealogy, which a lot of my sculptures tend to have these days, because I'm interested in how we carry our heredity with us, within our genes as well as in our heads. The voices in our heads, whether it's our mother, our grandmother, our various aspects of self. And so, also in the shrine, she's the central character. Above, there's a head with many heads, and a head with braids that kind of leaves one part of the shrine and sort of flows down into the next. And the braid for me is about umbilical connections, and going through virtual through your family, kind of. We find ways as artists to explain incomprehensible, inexplicable, and invisible. And so, you know, we're dealing with metaphor, yet we're trying to make something solid. But for me, the sacred does that best. Sacred art from all denominations is what I've been looking at ever since I realized that that's what I was doing. You know, I was doing it before I realized that's what I was doing. And the first time I saw a Leonardo drawing, I think it was a self-portrait, I thought it was God. I mean, it was such a profound... Or I thought it was Christ himself, like a little passport photograph. But there was an authenticity that I've been after ever since. And the things that I look at are far from contemporary. I look at anonymous things from the Met, things that are 5,000 plus years old, that are made extremely well. They must have been because they lasted. And usually they're fragments. So my sculptures in the show are fragments. It's about the fragment. And that's my new experience of sculpture.
It's funny, before I go on, one of my sculptures from this group has a braid, but I used the braid for a very different reason, because it has a harem girl. So this one has, one of the pieces has a braid, and then the kind of a veil and all kinds of other things. But that's why I used the braid there, so it's interesting that we're using the braid, but for very, very different reasons. This is one of the pieces that are in the reorientations. That is the top, that's a yarmulke. So that is the top of the sculpture. Can you go back?
Sure. And who are you?
I'm the one over here, the one with the short hair, and yeah, that's me.
Okay.
And we have 3 girls, I told you. So, but here at least we have a place to live, right? And there's some individual, you know, you can see that there are individual people here. So my sister Joy and my sister Pearl, and then I'm on either end. So that's on the yarmulke. So we each have a little place to be. That's the side of it. Maybe you can go, yeah, that's all the sides. Can you go to the front? Okay. Yeah, I know. The image in the middle is smeared on purpose because we were one big smear. We didn't have, we weren't really individuals in any kind of way. We were talking about, we kind of extensions of our parents to some degree. But as girls, we were like, you know, like a one big group. And also in these older cultures, they have an imposed closeness. You know, you're supposed to be, you know, move around like you're attached to one another. In terms of the, well, I'm going to talk about the fez cap first. The yarmulke is on top of a fez cap. Now, most of the sculptures have fez caps. Well, why do they have fez caps? Because both my grandfathers dealt in fez caps in India. One of them manufactured and imported, and the other one, my father's father had a shop where he sold fez caps in amber. So that's the foundation of the family, so it's the structural foundation for the sculptures. The veil issue is also, again, these are oblique references to the Middle East. That item was really a blouse. So I took the sleeves apart, and I took the front apart, and I took the borders off, and I made it into this object that you see here. It's a lot of figuring out how the heck I'm going to do something when I do it. And there are necklaces from the Turkish necklaces, and there are some, we call it the hand of God. Yeah, there's another name for it. No, Shaddai. So that's what that's made of. So I reuse, take apart, and put together a lot of found materials to say what I want to say. Yeah.
Is that actually of a scale that somebody could put their hand in it?
It's a
Yeah, so then that would be the opening for the eyes?
Actually, it's probably lower than the eyes because it's just a metaphor. It's probably being very annoying if somebody put it on. But I don't know that I ever put it on. I know it's a fez cap because I put on the fezzes. This is the other one that's in the show. That was the first one I ever did. But that has to do with the males and the females. The females in the Sephardic synagogues are upstairs. And the males, no matter how old they were okay for them to be down, where the holy books are. So,
And this is life size as well. You could wear this.
one, yeah, they're definitely wearable. And the images are all, they're from different images from my family. And that's a synagogue in Bombay, that's the Magen David synagogue.
Which is recently restored.
Restored, yeah. So this was the first one that I read. That boy is my father. So I have images of him all around. There's like a story all around the church house. Those are all images of him. But as a boy, being able to be near the most sacred things and the females having been upstairs.
Of any age.
Yeah, of any age. Was what this piece is really about. Also, it has a historical aspect too, which is obviously.
So I do want to open it up to any other questions, so that's perfect. Does anyone else have any questions specifically to each of the artists or one of the artists or on the show? Yeah, sure, go ahead.
So, yeah, I had a question, and before I ask my question, I just wanted to say thank you. I recently saw something in social media that hit me quite in a positive way, and it was something along the lines of the power of your ancestors are stronger than the power in your fears. And
Stronger than the power
of your fears.
of okay.
Yeah, and I think each of you really embrace, I love the way each of you embrace your heritage and your ancestral background. So my question was actually going to be along the lines of, is there a specific artwork that spoke to you more? But I think you've spoken about this. But as a secondary, in terms of people who have looked at your artwork, is there a particular feedback that was more profound than another when people looked at your artwork?
You mean if someone had a reflection on their work that they then were
absolutely
very struck by?
It happens all the time.
Yeah,
Is there a reason?
All they have to do is walk in and then you realize how odd your work is and somehow you project, somebody who just can hold one of your pieces and then you realize that's what it is. I can't explain it, it's suddenly it's objectified.
Yeah.
But I think the biggest compliment is when people buy it, obviously. But the most wonderful thing is when they realize, oh, that's me too. That's how I feel. Because when we delve into the personal, we find everybody there. Yeah. And that's what makes it sociological and political and so on. But you have to delve in to save yourself and everybody else.
So the question is, did we, any of us, cotton to someone's insight, or sometimes it's funny, you wouldn't believe like some of the things they say. But in terms of the work that I'm doing. I think if they're not familiar with the cultures, it becomes an interesting piece, which is fine. But then they miss the whole layering of the story, and also not even necessarily the story, but in between the lines, they miss. When I explain it, especially if they're unfamiliar with the culture, then they understand it more deeply. So I guess in this particular case with these works is that if somebody has a sense of it on many a level, I guess that would be more closer to my meaning. But again, people have, like you were saying, there's so many different people with so many different filters and so many different experiences. They're going to take from it what is resonant with them, what resonates with them. So I think because these works have many aspects, they can glom onto something that means something to them.
Recently, when my work was up, there was this one kid who came up to me and said, he looked at one of my sculptures that had cutout. I'm not sure if it's on the website. It should be on the transition. It was this one.
Oh,
Yeah. So there was a cutout with English cutout on it, and this it basically said I couldn't speak English the way people here do, and I felt different. And so this kid came up to me and said, "Oh well, when I came here, I felt stupid because I couldn't speak English, and I thought like I was the only one who couldn't speak." So and there was this other person who came up to me and said, I couldn't go back home to my grandmother's funeral, and that was on one of these hands. So when people connect themselves and feel the shared experience,
yes.
I think that's like the biggest point for me with my work.
Sorry, I also just want to say thank you, everyone here right now, for sharing this night with us, because you could have been anywhere, so that's really powerful. Did you have, yeah?
Yeah, could I ask you about the pieces that look like they have cut out letters?
Yeah.
What are they made of, and what do they say?
Yeah, so this one,
Yes.
they're handmade paper. They're made with handmade paper, and they're hand cut.
Well, what about the big ones?
They're all.
This is a panel with
So these are all singular panels, and they're all connected together with safety pins.
Very meticulously, I might add.
Yes.
So
So
these
yeah.
are the paper, yeah.
Yeah.
These are the clips here.
Yeah.
The safety clips.
Yes, those are the safety pins. So they're all individually yes, it's watercolor. I use watercolor on the work. They're hand cut with an X-Acto knife. And sorry.
What
Could
do
you
they say?
show the,
Which one? The full, yeah. These are the ones in the space tiers. But these are the safety pins.
some of them look room size.
Oh, yeah.
Unless I'm misinterpreting.
No, yeah.
Yes, they are.
Those are the ones I was particularly curious about.
Any transitional runs and showing
Yes.
the cell shots. Yeah.
Yeah.
These here.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. So.
That one.
Okay, sure.
So this one, was again like hand cut, and these are the patterns on them are from the photograph that this person shared with me, and they're the wallpaper design, and that's his favorite picture of himself standing against his his home back in Malaysia, and parts of the panel have the story hand cut on them, so you can actually read what the immigrant told me about his or her experience. And they're all joined together with safety pins.
Are they fragile?
Yes.
Tell them why you use safety pins, that's so interesting.
Yes. I use safety pins. So safety pin, I grew up, my mom always wore a sari. God help me, I don't know how to wear one. I've been wanting to learn how to wear one. But the sari, it's a very complex drapery, and she puts it together with a safety pin. My wedding sari was very heavy, And the person that dressed me up like just put safety pins and held the whole thing together with safety pins. And so for me, I was looking for a way to connect these panels together. When I was cutting them, I was frustrated because I didn't like any material that I was working with. And there was just like a bunch of safety pins on my studio table. And I was like, oh, that's the one that I need to use because that, like, that brought me back home. Like, like it's a very complex drapery that's held together with safety pins. And these are very complex narratives that are also held together with safety pins. And I use handmade paper in my work because handmade paper is not acid free, so it changes body over time, and especially with the way I cut it, it really changes body over time. So that's also part of the reason why I use handmade paper.
Is there one more question maybe we could get for the evening without no pressure on the last question? Yeah, go ahead.
I think I have a question. It's perhaps not really well formulated in my own head, but it seems to me that in all the work that you're describing, for the three of you, it refers to a culture which is very, very strong in your sense of self. And it's a culture that sort of has been, and you're not exactly in it now, although you might be partially in it. It varies for the speed, how much you're in it. And so the work sort of goes back to that and tries to sort of reach again that culture. And I'm just thinking right now of, that large show at the Breuer of Leah Selman.
Yeah.
Who also comes from a culture, and we happen to share that culture. And I'm thinking that in a very different way, she also sort of reaches back to that, but she does not do ethnographic in any kind of way. She does kind of huge eternal seas or skies or whatever it is. So, but I was thinking that in a way, your work sort of goes back and tries to stay in touch with a certain part of you. Is that right? And some of us, I also hate, and I share that culture with Leah, but I don't think that in my work, I go back to my culture. And maybe because it was not as strong or different as yours. I mean, Northern Europe is Northern Europe, and Northern Europe is basically cold blooded, so that could be it. But it's not as different.
So I guess the question is if you feel as though you're more different, is that, and that's why there's more incorporation of heritage and culture?
Because maybe that, as I said, I'm not sure that I have my questions sort of totally thought.
Absolutely, no, that was a wonderful question because it was more like a musing, a musing, not amusing. Because the first break for me of culture happened when I was 2 years old, and I've been recovering ever since. The place from England to here, no break in culture. There was no loss, absolutely none. But that break was seismic.
Was it like a trauma?
Yeah, absolutely, it was a trauma. I needed my grandparents. I needed them to show me who I was, and I didn't have them, so I had to make them out of paper and glue. I mean, it's a need. You need that. You need, otherwise, in a way, your sanity could be in danger. I really think that culture, the safety within a culture, is a sanity issue too, to make sense of the world, and you in it, and do you belong?
Oh, think because also, historically, that the weight has been on the Western world. So the Western world is kind of it's a known quantity. Whereas the cultures that we come from are, I don't like the word marginalized, and I really don't mean marginalized, but are,
Like a dominant culture.
It's not dominant. No, it's all things that happen, in recent years, it come to the fore. But in terms of, maybe that's why, it's also about assimilation, I think, in a way. I think because we are in Western cultures, I was always very proud that I was, I had such an interesting background and it was so convoluted. So I didn't want to be anything else. I was more proud of being convoluted, the interesting mix that we had. It was an oddity, but it was an oddity that I thought was, made us different. And that was interesting to me.
I think, yes. When I have this thing, but when I go back to India, it's like a switch for me. It feels like I never left home. But then when I come back, it's surprising, like though I've lived like the last 10 years here, I come back, I struggle for the first 2 weeks. I'm like, where am I? I never feel that way when I go back to India, and I go back to India like maybe once in 3 years. So a part of me wants to hold on to parts of my home in my work. A lot of the material choices, personally, I was told by my professors not to use them, and I always wanted to use them. So this was like my way of using those materials that I really wanted to use, whether it's handmade paper, whether it's safety pins, whether it's crafty materials that I was told not to use. But a big part of me is trying to understand where I belong, and I think I take that through my work to keep my sanity.
I just want to say thank you again to everyone for coming, and thanks again to ATOA for hosting us. And again, Friday from 6 to 8, we're having a closing party at 246 East 4th Street, near Avenue B. And also thank you to the artists for sharing in a really heartfelt way that.
Thank you. Thanks everybody for coming. I think there were a lot of great points made. I'm just going to read off a couple of key words that I wrote down that I heard along the way, just to sort of revisit some points in a sort of brief summation. I think identity was a critical issue here. It's first feeling exclusion, being part of the past that maybe you're pulled from, and maybe not even understanding the depths of your past. And then you come into another culture, maybe like the U.S., where you bring some of your past, but very quickly in 20 years, a lot of it you assimilate and melt into this melting pot, maybe feel a loss for some of the things. You are women artists, but you don't want to be pigeonholed as women artists. You want to be seen as artists, and you're all very socially concerned, but I'm sure that's not a pigeonhole that you want to fall into either. And so it's sort of a tricky game how your work is contextualized by curators and how it's understood. And you made the point very well, another time is going to understand everything a little differently. I would say one key thing that ties the work together, it's all very surreal in a way. From different approaches, you end up with surreal objects, and they have a sort of strength, and their cultural roots are very strong and obvious in your work. Your work actually had a feel of African power figures or oceanic figures, which is just what you wanted to hit at, but you went at it organically. And your mix of a yarmulke and also sort of a veil, and it's very strong stuff. And you create objects like that are very interesting. Some other key points, embedded influences. That's something we all carry around with us. There are words we use, we don't really know their origins, there are references and jokes. You brought a lot of good thoughts. This was a deep conversation. I appreciate all your time in the ATOA. Thanks you, and thanks those of you for coming out. We have another talk coming up in in 2 weeks. Topic, it's going to be an artist, Matthew Brannan. I want to thank Peter Duhon. Peter's over here. Peter's been our new programming manager, and he's put together an interesting program. Thank you, Peter. I look forward to the next one as well. And thank you, everybody. Thank you for coming and joining us again.
Thank you.